Courtney Scott here with KnowledgeWell Media, doing a Sunday recording. It is 5:02 p.m. on my Sunday. Most likely you as a viewer will be catching this on Monday, the October the 24th. But I wanted to go over a couple stories in the news, actually one in particular that I think is particularly disturbing. This article here from CBS News talking about the recent hacks on Friday of the past week. The heading for the article is New World Hackers Group claims responsibility for internet disruption. It says withering cyber attacks on server farms of a key internet firm repeatedly disrupted access to major websites and online services including Twitter, Netflix, and PayPal across the United States on Friday. The White House calls the disruption malicious, and a hacker group claimed responsibility, though its assertion couldn't be verified. Manchester, New Hampshire-based DYN Incorporated, or DYN, said its data centers were hit by 3 waves of distributed denial of service attacks, which overwhelmed targeted machines with junk data traffic. That's DDoS, distributed denial of service. The attacks shifting geographically had knock-on effects for users trying to access popular websites across the US, even in Europe. Quote, "The complexity of the attacks is what is making it so difficult for us," said Kyle York, the company's chief strategy officer. Continuing, "What they are actually doing is moving around the world with each attack." He said an East Coast data center was hit first. Attacks on an offshore target followed later. CBS News Homeland Security consultant Fran Townsend pointed to Russia as a possible instigator. Quote, is this sort of a brushback pitch from the Russians sending us a message that we should be pretty careful about engaging in this sort of cyber activity with them because they are very capable," she said. So the FBI and Department of Homeland Security told CBS News they were investigating, quote, "all potential causes," but they have not gone as far as to say that this was a state-sponsored attack. It goes on to say the data flood came from tens of millions of different internet-connected machines, including increasingly popular but highly insecure household devices such as web-connected cameras. It was an onslaught whose global shift suggested a sophisticated attacker. Though DYN said it had neither suspect nor motive. The level of disruption was difficult to gauge, but DYN serves some of the biggest names on the web, providing the domain name services that translate the numerical internet addresses into human-readable destinations such as Twitter.com. Steve Grobman, Chief Technology Officer at Intel Security, compared an outage at a domain name services company to tearing up a map or turning off GPS before driving to the department store. Quote, "It doesn't matter that the store is fully open or operational if you have no idea how to get there," he said in a telephone interview. Jason Reed, founder of the internet performance monitoring firm Cloud Harmony, owned by Gartner Incorporated, said his company tracked a half-hour-long disruption early Friday in which roughly 1 in 2 end users would have found it impossible to access various websites from the East Coast. Quote, "We've been monitoring DYN for years, and this is by far the worst outage event that we've observed, said Reed. DEN provides services to some 6% of America's Fortune 500 companies, he said. A full list of affected companies wasn't immediately available, but Twitter, Netflix, PayPal, and the coder Hangout GitHub said they experienced problems. Members of a shadowy collective that calls itself New World Hackers has claimed responsibility for the attack via Twitter. They said they organized networks of connected, quote, zombie computers called botnets that threw a staggering 1.2 terabits per second of data through a staggering 1.2 terabits per second of data at the DEN managed servers. Quote, we didn't do this to attract federal agents, only test power. Two collective members who identified themselves as Prophet and Zane told an AP reporter via Twitter direct message exchange. They said more than 10 members participated in the attack. It was not immediately possible to verify the claim. DEN officials said they have received no claim of responsibility but are working with law enforcement. Another article, BBC News. Smart home devices used as weapons in website attack or hack. Hackers used internet-connected home devices such as CCTV cameras or closed-circuit TV cameras and printers to attack popular websites on Friday, security analysts say. Twitter, Spotify, and Reddit were among the sites taken offline on Friday. Each uses a company called DEN, there's that name again, which was the target of the attack, to direct users to its website. Security analysts now believe the attack used the Internet of Things or web-connected home devices to launch the assault. Now that raises question with me, because if they're able to tap into these Internet of Things, which incorporate, like it says, web cameras, printers, even it mentions toasters here, anything that can be connected or whatever to the internet can be manipulated. Apparently, that's what this hack was about. Going on, the global event involved tens of millions of internet addresses. Security firm Flashpoint said it had confirmed that the attack used what's known as botnets infected with the Mirai malware. Many of the devices involved come from Chinese manufacturers, speaking to the printers and the webcams and things like that, come from Chinese manufacturers with easy-to-guess usernames and passwords that cannot be changed by the user, a vulnerability which the malware exploits. Quote, Mirai scours the web for IoT, or Internet of Things, devices protected by little more than factory default usernames and passwords, explained cybersecurity expert Brian Krebs. And then enlist the devices in attacks that hurl junk traffic at an online target until it can no longer accommodate legitimate visitors or users. The owner of the device would generally have no way of knowing that it had been compromised to use in an attack, he wrote. Mr. Krebs is intimately familiar with this type of incident after his website was targeted by a similar assault in September, in one of the biggest web attacks ever seen. Goes on to say it has emerged that BBC's website was also briefly caught up in Friday's attack. The BBC is not a customer of DEN itself, but it does use third-party services that rely on domain name system hosting facilities provided by DEN. Quote, I understand that these include Amazon Web Services, the retail giant's cloud computing division, and Fastly, a San Francisco-based firm that helps optimize page download times. Both companies have acknowledged being disrupted by the DDoS assault. Only some BBC users in certain locations would have experienced problems, and they did not last long. But there are reports that other leading media providers also experienced similar disruptions. It serves as a reminder, it says, that despite the internet being a hugely robust communication system, there are still some pinch points that mean a targeted attack can cause widespread damage. Today we answered the question, what would happen if we connected a vast number of cheap, crummy embedded devices to broadband networks, wrote Matthew Green, an assistant professor at the Johns Hopkins Information Security Institute. Jeff Jarmock, head of security for global business service Salesforce, pointed out that internet infrastructure is supposed to be more robust. Quote, in a relatively short time, we've taken a system built to resist destruction by nuclear weapons and made it vulnerable to toasters, he tweeted. So we see here that there's the cybersecurity measures that are supposed to protect our internet are actually faulty in some way or another. I don't know if there's nefarious activity behind the attack, but there are some things that appear to be kind of ironic. And I'll go over a list of some of those things, but a couple questions to ask is that can it affect cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin if they're able to get in and use what they're calling the IoT or Internet of Things, being your video cameras and your web cameras and your printers and things like that. If they can actually get in there, tap into the password and username, which they're saying now in this report that the username and password actually can't be changed by the end user, you or I. And so basically they stay the way that they come from the manufacturer, and that these hackers are actually able to get into that equipment and that and stuff and actually manipulate them and use them. So then if let's say you're holding on to Bitcoin, which is a digital currency, can that also be manipulated? That's a question to ask. Of course, our cameras and web devices, those could possibly be used as weapons against us then if they're able to tap into them. And, your privacy, that becomes an issue of privacy. Can this in any way be linked to affecting other machinery and gadgets, i.e. your cars or our house thermostats and things like that are caught up into the web of things as well? Remember, I think it was last month that there was a big conspiracy over Putin's limo driver that was killed by a car that crossed over the dividing line on the freeway there, and how people were questioning whether or not that car actually had fallen under someone else's control, since we do have the new technology with cars and being able to be controlled and being autonomous and driving on their own. So that's another thing to be suspect. Since cybersecurity seems flawed, the government may take over. Anytime that there seems to be a problem, as of late, it seems like the government looks for any way it can to get involved and to come in and take control over the business sector and things in the name of helping and protecting us. Let's see, government may claim that the Internet of Things, like the cameras and printers, being that they're coming over here and they're not being able to be changed and upgrade their security statuses from the factories, that the government may use that as a way to take control over the manufacturing of these web cameras and things like that. Well, we know when the government takes over and we give them more power and control, it tends to end up becoming abused, and so we may lose the control of the very instruments that we use on a day-to-day basis. And then, of course, there goes our privacy, and that's always a big issue with big government. So we see the effects of that, and we certainly don't want to continue to surrender more of our privacy over to the government. That kind of brought up to mind something else in our past history that I could see there's maybe a link here. Not only are we facing an election where Hillary Clinton could potentially and well, God forbid, be the next president of the United States of 2017. She would be coming into office if she were to become the president of the United States. But I see a correlation in the current hacking scare, and obviously she's trying to blame it on Russia and trying to, I believe, strike up some issues there where, of course, you strike fear into the heart of the American people, and we have a tendency to lean heavier on government, and then therefore giving up our security and things like that. But if you remember back to another scare, technology scare of Y2K, remember when we thought that because of the way that the date was, I believe the Y2 scare had to do something with the last 2 digits of the date, and then the system not being able to differentiate as to whether the year would turn over to back to 1900 with the 2 zeros at the end, or go ahead to 2000 as far as Y2K and the date. But if you remember back to that, but remember who was president at the time. It was none other than Bill Clinton himself. I found it ironic that now we have another hacking type of situation, or technology scare, as it's a high likelihood that Hillary Clinton could become the president of the United States. So I just found that strikingly similar. But another issue to pay attention to is the fact that as of October 1st of this year, we actually surrendered or gave over the control of our internet to the UN. And then all of a sudden now here in the same month, weeks later, we're having these large scale hacking attacks. I believe personally that these are actually tests to see the reaction of our system and how businesses would deal with it. I really strongly believe that this is not by coincidence, but by design. So that's something to pay attention to. Back in 2000 with the Y2K scare, we see that Bill Clinton signed actually a new law pertaining to the Y2K because of the threat of class action lawsuits towards businesses and things like that by the American people. So he actually signed a bill. I forget the bill. I had read over it, but basically protecting businesses and corporations against class action lawsuits. I'll have to look into that bill to see what actually the number of that bill was. But just a few things. I find it very odd and strange, the correlations between Bill and Hillary, and potentially in office and in office, or what at one time was in office, and how we're back to this technology scare all of a sudden. Here's another article by CNET, the heading, "The Massive Internet Outage Explained." What even happened on Friday? Your favorite websites were down, and it was all because one company got hacked. It's talking about DYN again, DYN. Here's how it happened and why it's likely to happen again. It says, if you never heard of a DDoS attack before, you could be forgiven for wondering what the frack was going on Friday. Not sure what frack means, but it goes on to say, as half your favorite websites stopped working. The acronym stands for Distributed Denial of Service Attack, which is technical speak for a simple but increasingly powerful tool for knocking websites offline. Until recently, DDoS attacks were used to take down smaller targets and were often seen as tools of activists and pranksters with a point to make. But an attack that takes down multiple major websites for hours, that's no joke. So what makes this kind of attack work, and how did it target all these sites at once? Here are the answers to your DDoS questions. And it goes on to say, what is a DDoS attack? A DDoS DDoS attack uses a variety of techniques to send countless junk requests to a website. This boosts traffic to the website so much that it gets overwhelmed, making it nearly impossible for anyone to load the page. Websites have to filter out good traffic from bad, kind of like a dam that lets only so much water through. But if someone upstream can send an unexpected torrent down, the dam will overflow and maybe even crack, letting all the water through. That floods the area below, and in our analogy, it drowns the website you're trying to reach. Now no one can go there. Why are some sites like Twitter and Spotify affected but not others? Friday's attack targeted one company, DIN Incorporated. That company manages web traffic for customers that includes Twitter, Spotify, Netflix, Reddit, Etsy, GitHub, and other favorites. DIN is the dam for all these websites. So if a company uses DIN to manage its web traffic, it could have been affected by the attack. But if a company uses another service in addition to DIN to manage its web traffic, it was likely spared the worst of the outages. It says, then again, who is behind the DDoS attack? I'll say that correctly one of these times. We don't know who's responsible. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security is investigating. We do know that the attackers were using a hacked network of internet-connected devices to send all the requests. There it is again. That network might have included devices like routers. Here's the list of what's known as the Internet of Things. Routers, security cameras, or anything else the hackers found convenient to take over. The hackers used malicious software called Mirai to infiltrate the devices. That's the same software hackers used to create a massive botnet that sent the largest documented DDoS attacks ever and took down 2 different websites just in September, earlier this year. Continuing on, what have been the biggest DDoS attacks? It says in September, attackers took down the website of cybersecurity writer Brian Krebs with the largest DDoS attack on history. We, as far as I know, have not been taught about the possibility of such an attack. And it's just funny how it's now on the uptick. We have, as of the second debate with Hillary and Donald Trump, Hillary's bringing out the possible attacks and things, and then blaming it on Russia. Now I find it ironic that the closer we get to the election, actually now all of a sudden this is all coming out full force. And I believe, like I said, I believe it's just a test. I believe it's, just testing to see how far or what effect that these type of attacks will have. So going on with this article, across the U.S. on Friday, people screamed at their phones and computers and went a little crazy trying to figure out which of their favorite websites were still working. At 7 a.m. local time, folks on the East Coast discovered that sites like Twitter, Spotify, Etsy, Netflix, and software code management service GitHub were knocked for a loop, affecting areas across the U.S. and parts of Europe. Quote, the earlier issues have resurfaced and some people may still be having trouble accessing Twitter, the company tweeted. We're working on it. Meanwhile, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security said it was investigating all potential causes. It wasn't until late in the day that DIN said the issue had been resolved. Hackers had used what's known as distributed denial of service attack, DDoS, conscripting hordes of internet-connected devices like computers, routers, and security cameras into a botnet to cripple DIN's servers. Based in New Hampshire, DIN is both a DNS service provider, translating URLs into IP addresses, and an internet management company, helping website customers get the best possible online performance. It also filters out bad traffic headed to the websites, and that's where things fell apart Friday. By overwhelming DIN, the attackers were able to overwhelm many of its customers. Last month, noted security expert Bruce Schneier said core internet companies were seeing people probing their networks to learn how well they could respond to DDoS attacks. The title of his blog post, Someone is Learning How to Take Down the Internet. So that's something you might want to look into. Let's see here, continuing on. DDoS attacks have been around since the dawn of the modern internet, but they've been getting more powerful. Last month, the website of security expert Brian Krebs was hit with 620 gigabytes per second of traffic. Until now, continuing on, successful attacks on sites as large and popular as Twitter, Reddit, and Netflix have been rare. Quote, given the drastic increase lately in the size and scope of DDoS attacks, DNS providers like Den are scrambling to increase bandwidth capacity to withstand the latest attacks, said Jeremiah Grossman, chief security of cybersecurity of the cybersecurity company SentinelOne. They're attractive targets for large-scale DDoS attacks. So yeah, check out that article. Actually dig into it. It's somewhat new for me, but just wanted to touch on those topics. As I did a little bit of reading, I'll do some more to try to bring out more information. But I do believe we will find a correlation between historical events as far as technology and the internet goes and what is actually transpiring and happening today as of Friday of last week. But again, what are the ramifications? How far-reaching can this type of a hack reach, and what kind of effect will it have on us in our future? Like I said, I believe that they're testing things. I believe that they're trying to see how ready, prepared we are. We hear lots of things of EMP attacks and things like that. Well, what would be the difference if they're able to affect everything that the internet touches, or anything that it entails the internet and the power and what it's powered with? You know, a lot of our lights and things, intricacies of our houses and components we use on a day-to-day basis, even in factories and things like that, are all somehow interlaced in some type of a network. Well, if groups are able to get into those devices and use them, you know, as our Internet of Things, then what kind of damage and ramifications can we be facing and looking at? I do not personally believe that it is Russia, but I do believe that this is a higher up type of operation. I believe it's government tainting things and trying things out to try to get more control, to strike more fear into the hearts of its people. So just a few things to pay attention to. You want to keep your eye on and make sure that you are digging in and trying to get as much information as you can. And here at KnowledgeWell Media, you know that information is our game, and that's what we're trying to present to you so that you can make informed conclusions. So we want to thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned as we bring more updates detailing these cyber attacks. And as they said in these articles, you could pretty much prepare for more to come. So I want to thank you for tuning in today, and be blessed and be aware and stay in the know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share. We covet your patronage and your support. So keep all those that you care about, all those that you love, in the know, and make sure that you are prepared for anything, because we don't know what nefarious things the government is up to in these last and evil days. I believe that there is more to come before and after the election, things that we've never had to deal with in our lives. But stay prayerful and remember to find God in your day. This is Courtney Scott with KnowledgeWell Media, signing off.